Okay, good morning. Welcome, everybody. Happy Sunday morning. Hope everybody's doing well. I'm sure we'll have more folks joining us. We also have YouTube also on this. So if anybody has any YouTube comment or a question, please type it in the chat and I will try my best to respond. I kind of flip back and forth between the live stuff here on our Revero Carnivore Diet channel and then YouTube. So I was just was kind of looking at autoimmunity is something that we have seen a lot of success with the carnivore diet, and there's a lot of proposed mechanisms. And so I'm looking at some of the recent studies that have come out, and there was a study came out a couple of years ago looking at glucose intake in the diet, and it showed higher rates of exacerbating autoimmune disease. That was a study I just found out about. It's been published in 2019, but I just found out about it. So new to me. High glucose exposure leading to autoimmunity. There's a study came out, I think, last year looking at, for instance, rheumatoid arthritis, which is a type of autoimmune disease, which was exacerbated by fiber in the diet, particularly higher fiber diet. It interacted with one of the bacterial species in the gut, Prevotella, that to lead to increasing problems with autoimmune conditions. And then also there's another study out here from Nature, was published last year. Inulin fiber, which is a very common fiber, it's often in supplements, but it's also part of like natural fruits and things like that, and it promotes microbiota derived inflammation, which also secondarily can be associated with autoimmune disease. So there's a lot of mechanistic data out there that I'm starting to suggest why some of these why when you remove all those things, which certainly a carnivore diet does, both the fiber and the glucose from the diet for the most part, then we see a lot of people resolve autoimmune disease. And I mean, for any guys who've been around for a while, I've seen that over and over again. I certainly have seen more than enough to convince me that there's something going on here. And I've seen, like I said, from everything from Crohn's disease to MS to rheumatoid arthritis to psoriasis to just about every other, Graves' disease, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, myasthenia gravis. I've seen all of which are autoimmune related diseases, and all of them I've seen success with carnivore. So I think that's pretty darn interesting. And so hopefully, as time goes by, we'll get more information, more data, more studies on that. Nonetheless, we will continue. We will, as part of our company, Revero, we'll be using diets that exclude some of those things for certain conditions, like autoimmune diseases. And hopefully, I'm sure we'll have great success with that. And hopefully we'll change the paradigm, because it needs to, there's too many people suffering. And the current paradigm is we'll just put you on a biologic drug, put you on some kind of $5,000 a month infusion to tamp down your immune system, rather than removing the cause. We're just going to treat the symptoms, which is, the whole healthcare paradigm now, which basically maintains people in sort of states of disease in which they just, sort of deal with the symptoms and don't actually address the cause for that. So anyway, with that said, good morning, everyone. Hopefully everyone's doing well. If anyone has anything they want to share. And there's just a comment on YouTube about frequently sharing PubMed articles showing that constipation resolved by removal of fiber. Yeah, that's a study that's been around for a while. It's basically an intervention for chronic constipation. They show that completely removing fiber from the diet was one intervention that actually helped. And so, but if you don't have chronic constipation, people argue that only applies to a certain segment of the population. But I will tell you that, for all the people that think you can't go to the bathroom on a carnivore diet are going to be constipated, that is not the case. I mean, the Harvard study clearly showed that. I mean, they saw that, the rates of diarrhea, constipation, in that cohort was about 4%, which is quite low. It's probably lower than the general population, to be honest. And so many people that go carnivore will note that their digestive issues improve and often improve dramatically. And so, I mean, like I said, it's just, there's all this speculative stuff about what's going to happen. I love reading these articles that, in the kind of the mainstream press, it says this is what would happen if you went carnivore. And I'm like, well, none of that happens. Or if it does, it's extremely rare. And probably less so than even the standard regular diet. So it's just kind of funny to read this stuff. And you're like, well, That's not actually, once you actually talk to someone that's actually done the diet for a period of time, more than, a week, you get some journalist that tries it for a week, and, that's their whole sort of source of information. Charlie saying, welcome. Everybody have happy Sunday. Likewise. Hopefully everybody's doing well. I've got on the menu today skirt steak and a couple fillets that I'll be munching on here in about an hour. I mean, I'm already pretty hungry for them. And so looking forward to those. I, sous vide and then seared and then in the oven is pretty much what I do almost every day. I rarely deviate from that strategy because it works so well for me, because I can always get the temperature like I like it, a little bit of salt, because people are asking me, what do you put on there? What kind of seasonings, things like that. The comment from Keto Karen says, whole life and constipated, keto carnivore has fixed that. Good for you, Karen. That's good to hear. Yeah. Somebody's asking about plant protein powder, if it's harmful. I mean, it could be. I mean, I don't know. You have to see, but I mean, like the plant protein stuff is, in my view, obviously inferior for a number of reasons. They can formulate. I mean, they can piece together different protein sources and make it a relatively complete protein. You still have nutrients you're dealing with, which will slow or interfere with some of the absorption. And then there's, potentially their gut irritants, and they can be gut irritants to a lot of people. So not my, anytime I see like these plant-based protein powders, I just shake my head. Or I see some product on the shelf and it says made with the power of plants. And I'm just like, that just means you've used the cheapest ingredients you could possibly get. And you're trying to greenwash it or health wash it. So some sucker will buy it. So anyway, it's kind of funny. Yeah, another person in here, there's Miss Inquisitive, I guess, saying the same thing, constipation, all the fiber. And you're told, is eat more fiber. And I think, Paul Mason summed it up very well when he said, it's like sticking, if you have a traffic jam and the solution is, let's just put more cars in there, it doesn't seem to work. Because you have to realize that constipation is a it's often a muscular problem or a neuromuscular problem with the gut mobility. And so just shoving more in there and something that's not already working is just going to serve to back it up more. My neighbor said it's not good to feed your pets human food, chicken. Well, Tricia, I would laugh too. I mean, it's kind of, you think about it, I mean, if you look at the status of our pets, I mean, it's pitiful. I mean, sure, of course, dogs should be eating chicken. I mean, that's what they would, what do you think they're good at killing those birds? I mean, that's probably, and I think about it, like when you look at like what animals like a dog could kill. I mean, they're not going to kill a cow very easily. I mean, they could kill a bird quite easy, particularly one that's, injured or something like that. They'd snap that thing up in a second. A lot of people have hunting dogs where they chase down ducks and stuff like that, but yes, crazy to think that people are telling you, thinking our pets are designed to eat kibble. I mean, it is, and that's essentially what the human diet is becoming. Is human. I call it human pet food. It's basically flavored kibble for humans in different shapes and containers and brightly colored boxes, and we get the same thing. We got all you look at all the dogs are fat, they're arthritic, they smell bad, their skin's bad, their eyes are all runny, and and they fart all the time, and that's basically what that's kind of what the humans are doing. But yeah, it's kind of crazy there. All right, what else do we have today? Let me go check back in here. Let's see. Okay, Stephen has his hand up. Good morning, Stephen. What do you have to say this morning?
Yeah, I was listening to Don Layman on a number of recent podcasts, and he was basically saying with the leucine requirement being what it is, which he's putting at like 6 to 7 as opposed to 2 to 3.
6 to 7 what per day, you mean, or what?
I forgot what the unit of measure was.
Yeah, it's usually grams. Yeah, 6, 7 grams.
Okay, yeah, that's the correct measure. I mean, he's saying, on a plant-based, if you eat enough calories, you can probably get the 3 grams, if you mix and match carefully. But he's basically saying that once you look at what's the actual higher, what he believes is a higher requirement, especially as you get older and you're not being so hormone driven. He's saying that the only way most vegans could get that requirement is more supplementation of those amino acids of the branch chains.
Yeah. I mean, it's, like I said, the leucine trigger is between 2.5 and 3 grams to trigger muscle, to trigger the mTOR muscle protein synthesis pathway. So that, you're usually talking about getting 2.5 to 3 grams per meal. And, if you're eating, say, and Don will say, basically 2 meals is what you need effectively to stimulate muscle protein most effectively or most efficiently. So yeah, I mean, that would be 6 or 7 would be basically, 2.5 to 3 doubled and a little bit more maybe.
But when he was translating that into plant food, the amount of calories and the volume you would have to eat to get that is absurd. So the only way you can get it is through concentrates.
Right. So I mean, and there's people that are happy to take supplements. They said, well, the human diet is, it's like, well, we're designed to eat supplements. These same people that tell you, everybody needs to be on pills and antidepressants and cholesterol lowering meds and on and on and on, anti-inflammatories. I mean, it's the same. So, well, they just kind of resign themselves to eating, supplements constantly. I mean, the vegan diet, even the most diehard staunch vegans will say you can't do a vegan diet without supplementation, particularly with B12. And there's probably a longer list than that, as many of us will point out. So yeah. And the caloric requirement, that's one of the things. I mean, Lehman did an analysis, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. He put a paper on if the whole country were to go to plant-based, what would that mean? And it showed that while we could potentially produce more calories, we would have critical nutrient deficiencies. And one of them was leucine. I think it was leucine, lysine, zinc. And we would have to consume considerably more calories to get those nutrients. And so what happens with all the more calories, we have more obesity. And so, yeah, I mean, it's like, you'd have more malnourished fat people, which is the last thing we need. We need less of that because we already have too many as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, but it's, I mean, Don's the one that's discovered the leucine trigger for muscle protein synthesis. So it's kind of.
He was also saying, and I'm not completely clear on this, but he's saying, I mean, most of your amino acids go through your liver, but leucine and the other branch chains don't go through your liver and are metabolized directly by your muscles. Is that correct?
I don't know. I haven't heard that before. I know that, all of the different amino acids have somewhat differential properties. Like, like I said, some of them are ketogenic, some of them are gluconeogenic, some are both. I know the branch chain, I think leucine, lysine, and I think valine or isovaline, I think, are the ones that have a kind of a special properties that give them. And it might be. I mean, I'm sure if he's said that, it's probably because he's, that's his career. I mean, I'm sure he knows how it's metabolized. So, but interesting. Charlie said you've read some articles that treating symptoms instead of the root cause is less litigious. I don't know the answer to that, Charlie. I haven't seen that. I mean, the problem, like I said, there is a local standard of care. I mean, when you're a practicing physician and you deviate from the local standard of care and a negative outcome occurs, then you are liable, then you become, potentially liable for litigation. And so, I mean, there has to be legitimate harm caused and that type of stuff for it to go forward. But, it's, and one of the things, as a physician, we have an incredibly litigious, field, like my field in particular, orthopedic surgery, extremely litigious. Everybody sues orthopedic surgeons. They get sued all the time. And then certain states are more litigious than others. So I practice in New Mexico in a very litigious field. And I had, in the thousands and thousands and thousands of operations, I had one person bring a lawsuit against me, which was basically thrown, it was dismissed. But most of the guys that, if you practice a career, particularly like a obstetrics or some of these high risk fields, you're almost guaranteed to get sued. I mean, it's not a matter of when, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when and how many times. And it's gotten worse and worse and worse. And so physicians, they practice this defensive medicine, and so a lot of they won't even like we had I remember a guy that was, when I was training, his name Mike Rasul, good surgeon. I mean, he's very good, very conservative, but he would almost treat no one. I mean, it was just like he wouldn't do an operation on you until you were teed up perfectly. And I mean, there's a point where like it becomes ridiculous. It's like, well, this person had one lab out of it. Can't do the surgery. He would cancel surgeries at a drop of a hat and would do like 1/3 the number of surgeries a typical surgeon would do. And so, I mean, it was just kind of it's kind of a point where, I mean, you're going to help these people. I remember when I went down to Peru on a medical mission, I mean, it was just like, it was so crazy that there was nothing. I mean, it was just like literally like, I remember we got there to operate on kids to do like, clubfoot surgeries and, DDH, developmental hip dysplasia surgeries and, all these things, and taking kids with extra fingers and things like that. We were doing all these surgeries they didn't have access to. And we thought we were going to, see 150 patients the whole time we were there. Day one, 500 people showed up, 500 patients showed up, and it was like a zoo. And they were like moms holding their kids up in the air with some deformity. Hey, operate on my son or kid. And we would just take them in. I said, okay, we can do that. And we take them in. And it was like, if they hadn't eaten, great, because typically, you go to surgery and it's NPO, but over there, if somebody had eaten, they just make them puke. They would make them puke before surgery. So, and the reason you do that, why do you do that? Why don't, a lot of people don't know why you want people not to have stuff in their stomach. It was because during anesthesia, sometimes that stimulates, a reflex where you throw up. And if you throw up and it goes in your lungs, because your airway's closed, I mean, clears off from the tube, then you have this aspiration pneumonia, and that can be, potentially even fatal. And so you don't want somebody with a full belly going in the ER or going under anesthesia. So, but it was like no paperwork. I mean, they literally, I think they signed maybe one sign that said, do surgery. And there's no insurance, nothing. It was just really crazy. So it was kind of a, the extreme of what you did. And the same thing, like when I was in Afghanistan, I mean, it was just like, I remember they had, the Egyptians, we had all kinds of clinics there. We had the U.S. clinic. There was a Korean clinic, and there was an Egyptian clinic, and the Egyptians were like, they were seeing like 500 people a day. I mean, their care was literally like 3 seconds. Somebody would walk in, hey, do this, and it was gone. It was like, no, just point and go. It was just funny how little it was done. But yeah, that as far as root cause, type of stuff. I mean, you have to pay attention to that stuff, and you want good outcomes. And it's like that's the thing. Even if you do the best job you possibly can and give everybody and you do the right things, and there's still a bad outcome, you're still liable to lawsuits. I mean, it's just some of them, a lot of them are dismissed, but some of them aren't. It's kind of crazy. All right. Trish is saying the doctor did his hip 4 years ago, had a 1% rate. We was very picky about everything. Sounds like, I'm not sure what you mean by 1% rate. I mean, did he operate on 1% of the people he sees, or that are surgical candidates? Yeah. Well, I'm glad you had a good result with the hip. And, like I said, I'm assuming it's a hip replacement, because hips are, and that's a quite it's interesting. There's hip replacements go back to really the 1960s, I think. And they have been one of the most successful operations of all times. It's interesting when it comes to, outcomes and things like that. So it's across all specialties, hip replacements are one of the best, most, successful surgeries of all time. And there's some definite problems with hip replacements. I mean, there are, there's certainly complications. leg length discrepancies. You come out there, one leg is, shorter than the other, or longer, depending. You have nerve injuries, bleeding, infection, things like that. Those things they all happen occasionally, but they're good operations generally. Okay. Let me go back to YouTube and see what's happening over there. If anybody's got any other, so Gigi's asking, how do you join these Zooms? Yeah, if you go to carnivore.diet, you can just sign up, you can get a free membership, at least, for the first month, and then you can access and that type of stuff. Right. JG is saying, thanks for inspiring. Well, you're welcome. Good to know you're doing better. Yeah, some more comments on dog food. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that, there's, the whole thing about the grain-free dog food and dogs developing hypertrophic myopathy, where they're dropping dead of that. So you have a lot of dogs that are eating these primarily pea protein dog foods, and they're getting a lot of heart disease with that, And of course, as some of you guys know, pea protein is being pushed in all these fake plant burgers, like Beyond, I think it's Beyond, is Beyond Meat the one? Yeah, Beyond Meat uses pea protein. It's interesting, all the pea protein that they use or much of it is sourced from China. So it's imported from China, at whatever shipping and, fossil fuel costs that might be, and then some of the Chinese agricultural practices are somewhat suspect, as you might imagine. And so anyway, you get people willing to gobble that stuff up, but it's kind of I mean, it's like I said, if it tastes good, and I'm not saying Beyond Meat tastes good. I couldn't tell you. I've never had it. I don't know if any of you guys have tried it. Hopefully not. more common sense and not having zero desire to try that stuff. But it just I've heard some people say when it cooks, it smells really weird and smells kind of bad and that type of stuff. But anyway, all right. Anybody have anything they want to share this morning?
Hey, Shawn. I got tasked with helping my neighbor's son be put on a carnivore diet because of his severe autism. And it's a very daunting task, and I've never done anything like this before. Aside from videos for resources, is there anything you can recommend to me?
Well, I mean, there's a Facebook group called the Autistic Carnivores. Tom Clark runs that group, and they have several thousand members of people, either parents of autistic kids or adults with autism. So that might be a resource for both you and for that other person. I don't know how old the kid is or how you said he's severely.
He's 5. Yeah, he like stomps and the whole building shakes. He screams.
Yeah. Is he verbal?
He's nonverbal, but
Yeah.
his mom told me he was verbal at 2.
Okay. Well, I mean, one of the problems with autistic children is they have a lot of sensory difficulties. A lot of the food, it can be texture, it can be presentation, it can be, I don't know what you're dealing with, but I mean, sometimes you have to consider all those things. And if there's a way, how do they communicate with him now? Does he have any form of communication, or is it?
I mean, I saw him outside on the playground the other day because our apartment complex has a unit, a playground across our unit. And he was normal. Like, aside from being nonverbal, he can like get on the stairs, go on the slide, run around.
Does he listen? I mean, does he listen? Can he understand spoken direction and stuff like that?
I think so. Sometimes.
And maybe he's able to shake his head and no, yes, whatever. I mean, there's some way to sort of get feedback from the kiddo. But I mean, like I said, I mean, I don't know what he's eating currently. I mean, do you have any idea what he currently eats?
Oh, they're Indian, and I can smell their honestly delicious food in the hallway sometimes. So it must be very hard for them.
Well, I mean, obviously, I don't know if I guess do they have a religious prescription against beef? I mean, is beef not an option for him?
Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised. If that's the case, I would recommend goat and lamb to them, probably lamb because it's fattier.
Yeah, yeah. I
Uh,
mean, lamb. I don't know if they do pork. I mean, obviously things like that. But I mean, you're going to have to deal with appearance and texture and those types of things. Typically. I mean, and it's any little kid. I mean, you're going to be dealing with that stuff, and it's going to be, um, you know, um, and I don't know how much you can reason with the kiddo, but I mean, it may be like, you don't get this until you eat this. You just start. I mean, I don't know if he's been vegetarian the whole time, which could be. I don't know. I mean, or mostly plant based. You just have to start saying, I mean, are you going to be like feeding him? Are you going to be there physically feeding him?
no. I would just be putting an instructions manual of
Yeah. Well,
resources.
I would, I mean, they've got to obviously start getting him to eat more meat somehow, right? I mean, it might be initially in the sauces. If it's obviously Indian cooking is very spice and aromatic and very rich, and it tastes good. I mean, I used to eat Indian food too when I was prior to carnivore, but so I mean, maybe just putting lamb in some sauce, very small pieces, so it's so the texture is quite easy for him, and then gradually, eventually, make that more and more of his meal, and then at some point start to taper down some of the sauces if they're still problematic, and see how it is. But I think lamb would be a good place to start. Like you said, lamb is arguably as good or better than beef in many ways. And so that is something that might be good. Like I said, I see so many kids eating like chicken nuggets and stuff like that. For some reason, kids love them, but I mean, I'm not a fan of chicken nuggets. I think they're most of them are. I mean, I guess you can make homemade ones that would be better, but I mean, most of the commercial chicken nuggets, or you go to like McDonald's and they're just full of garbage, and so I wouldn't go with that stuff. So, hot dogs, maybe you can do some pork hot dogs or something like that. That might be a lot of kids like sausage and hot dogs and things like that. I mean, that's how I would start, and then and then try to taper him in. I mean, like I said, maybe he starts out with 20% of his diet being that, and then you just gradually increase the amount over and over time and see if it has an impact on him, because they might, I mean, I don't know if you listened to the podcast we had the other day with the couple that had a profoundly nonverbal autistic child that they thought was, I mean, they, because they didn't know anybody, they thought his intelligence was quite low. And it turned out once they were able to find a way for him to communicate through a text board, he was actually quite intelligent, like even savant, like very, very smart. And the whole time you're like, separate the red beads from the blue beads type of stuff, kind of baby level stuff as a 15-year-old kid. So that's that, and that is a daunting task. But I mean, like I said, that look up autistic carnivores on Facebook. That might be another good resource for the family to participate in, because
I think this kid is a genius, Shawn, because when I'm in the hallway, he doesn't do this to my roommate nor his friends that come over, but when I'm in the hallway, he runs toward me and he grabs my arm and he starts shaking me and he's like, ugh. And I think it's because he's asking for help. I think he knows I can help him somehow. And I think he's just dying to communicate. Like I said, his mom told me that he was verbal at 2. Which tells me that he was probably breastfeeding, and then he got off the breast, and then they started putting carbs in his mouth, and then that's when he lost the ability to speak.
Well, who knows? I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, it's, anytime you speculate into the cause of autism, it's very controversial. But yeah, I mean, I think that if that helps, it'd be interesting to see how it goes. Anyway, Stephen has his hand back up. Stephen, did you have another thing you want to share?
Oh, did that podcast with the autistic parents post yet?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, and I haven't had a chance to listen to it yet then. Does it go over some of the dietary potential benefits of carnivore or keto diets on autism? Because I hear a lot of people think, if you improve your microbiome, that helps somehow, but it all seems somewhat I don't know if any of it's really supported by, any clinical research or not.
Well, I mean, this was trying to find the podcast here. Let me just hang on a second. Yes, it was released a week ago, 7 days ago. Holly and Matt. It's titled "They Got to Know Their Son Thanks to Meat." This was more just their personal experience with this, with how changing the kid's diet to basically a carnivore diet allowed the kid to just dramatically improve, his ability to function. I mean, there is literature out there on ketogenic diets and autism. I mean, that those have been published, so there is some data out there. Obviously, the carnivore data has not been done.
What's the speculative, N equals one mechanism that they think the reason for this improvement? Is it getting them off of food or onto meat?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, my suspicion is a combination of the above. I mean, I think, like I said, if you look at some of the problems that autistic children and adults face, sometimes it's perseveration, sometimes it's emotional ability, just inability to cope. And I think some of that maybe is glucose excursions. When you're having these high glucose excursions, we know that impacts our even in a neurotypical child. I mean, it causes emotional ability, and so I think having a steadier supply of energy maybe has a calming effect on the brain, perhaps. I think the nutrition, obviously, a well-nourished brain is a healthier brain, and so I think as meat has a lot of nutrients that our brains need, to include some of the fats, things like zinc and iron, and choline and carnitine and creatine and carnosine and all those types of things that you don't really get in plant-based diets. So I think it's a combination. I mean, I think it's removing the wrong stuff and eating more of the right stuff. So, I mean, that's, again, I mean, you could probably, I mean, I haven't done, I mean, like I said, you could probably find studies looking at, say, carnitine and autism and creatine and autism. I suspect they're out there, or maybe, or at least animal model studies or something like that. So you could say, what are the components that are found very richly in meat-based products? And we know these things: taurine, creatine, carnosine, anserine, all these things that are there. And then you could, or the EPA and DHA and, vitamin D3 and all these things that are animal products. You could probably find studies showing improvements in neurologic function in general, and maybe even specifically in autism. I just haven't specifically looked at all those, but I suspect at least some of those are there. If you do, somebody's bored and they want to Google that real quick, you can find this stuff very quickly. I mean, it's just like, just a quick question, but there is definitely ketogenic diet interventions in autism that are published.
Have you seen any improvement with you? Isn't one of your children somewhere on the spectrum?
Yeah. My oldest, my 17-year-old is a high functioning autistic child. I mean, he's very smart. I mean, he's got photographic memory recall. But I mean, he's significantly socially awkward, and unfortunately, I don't have him most of the time. He's with his mom most of the time. And, I know she feeds him meat. I know that. I mean, she's not a plant-based wacko or anything like that. But, the problem with him is he is so thin. I mean, he's literally my height. He's 6'5", and he's probably half my body weight. He's like 135, 140. So he's emaciatedly skinny. And, so he's constantly eating. He drinks a ton of milk and eats a bunch of apples, and then he'll eat some meat, and I don't know what else they feed him. But so, I mean, it's like, if you don't feed him enough, then he just withers away. And so I mean, he's, like I said, he's highly functioning. I don't know if he'll be able to live independently. That's the question, if he'll ever be able to live independently or not. So we'll see. He's going to be supposedly going to a school away after his senior year in high school, a school that's kind of designed for, developing independence. We'll see how he does with that. But I have not had a chance to put him on a strict carnivore diet. Maybe one day I'll get, when he's out of the house with mom, he wants to come live with me for a year, I can get him in there. I'd, take him and just, feed him steak all day and make him lift weights. And he doesn't like to do that. That's the thing. It's kind of frustrating for me, because I'm the guy's like, come on, man, let's train. And my daughters are my one daughter in particular is the only one of my kids that I can get to seriously train. My youngest little boy, he's still too young. He's 10. So we'll see, man, when he hits puberty and he starts caring about what he looks like and he becomes a boy, then he may that. I'll be happy to train him. I want to just comment. So Charlie says a great grandchild had appendicitis. So good luck with him. Hopefully, where's he located? Is he in Texas or where's he at?
Yes, sir. He's in Dallas, and they went to the Dallas Children's Hospital. But I was just so surprised at the speed at which they did the appendectomy and got him in and got him out. And he's already home. This is 24 hours, less than 24 hours since.
You go to the ER, you get a CT scan, shows a hot appendix. We'll line them up, man, and it's like a 30-minute operation. Pop laparoscopic. Just boom, 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 cut it out and hit it out. Yeah, you get done a lot of acute stuff. I used to do hip fractures in 10 minutes. It was just like once the patient was asleep. The problem was these old people that. When I say old, 90-year-old. You put them to sleep. And you don't want them under anesthesia very long at all. We would try to do spinals on some of them, but they had such arthritic backs that they would have a hard time getting a spinal anesthetic. So if they were put to sleep, they really appreciated, the anesthesiologist would really appreciate minimal to no blood loss.
I know.
Minimal blood loss and minimal anesthetic, because that would be so my job was to, do a good job, but also be very efficient and minimize blood loss. And so we would get in there and just, it was just like, the equipment is so nice now. It was, the hardest part of the procedure was just passing a guide rod. So you drill a little hole in what's called a greater trochanter, the tip of the hip. Where you feel, when you feel the side of your hip on the side, you feel that tip of that bone. That's where you make a little incision over that. You put a little drill in there and you drop a little rod through that, a little thin rod, and a nail nail slides over it. You just kind of pass it through, tap it in, and then there's 2 screws that you got to put in. You kind of line them up. One's on a guide and one you need an X-ray for. And if you had a good X-ray tech that could get you your images real quick, okay, this, boom, shot, and then you just line it up, put your screws in, rinse out the wound and zip it up, and you're done. And it's, I think I did one in, I think 8 minutes was the fastest I ever did one. This is a real skinny patient. A lot of these old women are skinny, they're skin and bones. And so real easy when you get a big fat patient in there, man, it's like much bigger incision. You can't dig in through to find the thing, and it takes a lot longer. And so that's one of the reasons why as surgeons, we prefer our patients to be thinner, because, more blood loss, bigger incisions, more challenging procedure, on and on and on. So anyway.
We just remember the times that the surgeries, the appendectomy surgeries, were open cavity surgeries, and it took a long time to heal and so forth. Now it's just almost instant.
Yeah, that is true. It's quicker. I'm going to go back over to YouTube. There's a question here from Amelia. Dr. Bear, I've increased my meat and aim to become full carnivore. I've done this for 2 months and feel great, but my skin has become so dry. Why? Well, a couple things I can just think of. One is, I think, you increase meat. I don't know what else is in the diet. How much of a percent, if you displace a lot of carb and now you're on a low carb diet, we know that low carbohydrate diets require a little more fluid in a lot of ways. A lot of people get dehydrated, because it's natural natriuresis and sodium and water coming out. A lot of times, remember the skin is, obviously a living structure, but having enough fat in the diet also, the skin has to produce, the fat that, the sebum and things like that are, made out of fat that help to nourish our skin. So having enough fat in the diet, having enough fluid in the diet, are some of the things. I don't know, like I said, without more specific information, it's hard to say specifically. Some people, will develop a rash when they go carnivore. Again, you mentioned you just increase more meat, so I can't say without, what else is going on. So hard to say, but anyway, thanks for that question. And then, let's see. Yeah, several just comments on YouTube about how they're breading stuff and natural spices and all that stuff. So anyway, um, NG, do you have any info about carnivore helping neuropathy? Asking for my dad. He has been diagnosed diabetic. I know his diet and has an A1C of 5.7. Diet doctor said he thinks it's related to his kidneys and neuropathy. Well, I can't comment one way or the other whether it's related to his kidneys or not, but I can tell you that I have seen a number of people reverse neuropathy for sure. That is something that I've got. If you go to carnivore.diet and you just look under the success stories tabs and you just in the search bar type in neuropathy, you will definitely find a number of people that have successfully reversed neuropathy with that. Many times it's related to diabetes. Diabetes is one of the more common causes of neuropathy that you get. And we know that as blood sugar normalizes, often neuropathy recovers. And, we see the same thing with things like gastroparesis, which in my view is kind of a type of neuropathy. Anything, the nerves to the gut stop working as well. And I think it's the same sort of pathophysiology that's going on. So we see gastroparesis reversing, we see peripheral neuropathy recovering, certainly with that. Now, obviously diabetes is one of the more common causes. Heavy metal toxicity is another one. You can have, infections, and there's other things that lead to neuropathy, but certainly, yes, the short answer is we do see that. And there are many people that can attest to that being helped. And, if you go into the medical practice, you're not going to see people talking about reversing neuropathy. They're just going to tell you to take an anti-inflammatory drug or take some sort of nerve membrane stabilizing drug, Lyrica and things like that, gabapentin, which is an awful drug, quite honestly. A lot of people are on that for neuropathy. And so, yeah. Yeah, and then here's Charlie saying type 2 diabetic neuropathy went away from my wife after this way of eating. Yeah, so there you go. It's fairly common that we see neuropathy, particularly associated with diabetes, getting better. Particularly as the blood glucose normalizes. There's some thought that very high levels of blood glucose are directly neurotoxic, and so when you stop having that high level of glucose, it's interesting because well, it's interesting, about high blood glucose, and I guess it depends on how high it is. Like mildly high blood glucose, there is a genetic condition. I think it might be a glucokinase or hexokinase deficiency where people end up with high blood glucose, not super high, but high. Like diabetic high, but not like 300, but like 150s. And they don't develop any kind of diseases. They don't have any high rates of heart disease. So it's kind of like, is it glucose or is it some other underlying mechanism? And I think, obviously as you go carnivore, your glucose is going down, but are there other things that are also being fixed as well? And I don't know that we know that. I'm sure there are, but which they are specifically and what's related to the nervous system, we don't know. And the other thing is, we mentioned we've got, I don't know, he's not in here, but Kevin, he's dealing with multiple sclerosis and he's getting better. And when we have multiple sclerosis going on, we have this demyelination of the nerves. And so the myelin sheath is like the insulation on the wire. If you have a wire, that's how our nerves are made. They're, the neuron is on the inside, and you can think of that as the electric, metal wire, and then around it is wrapped in this fat layer called the Schwann cells and the myelin sheath, and that's all fat. And so when you have adequate fat, and there are animal studies that show that you cannot remyelinate nerves without extra dietary cholesterol. And so obviously with a carnivore diet, you're getting adequate dietary cholesterol. Some people say, I don't think it's excessive. I think it's adequate. I think a lot of people are not getting enough. So and here's another one. Cindy is saying also my peripheral neuropathy is gone. So they're, out of, 19, 18 people, two of them have stated that they've seen peripheral neuropathy go away. So it's certainly, so Diana is saying, I wound up with neuropathy from the chest tube after thoracotomy. it resolved in 6 months instead of a year, as I was told. Yeah, and like I said, when if you think about how they do, a chest tube, basically you make an incision on the side of the ribs right there, and then underneath every single rib runs a neurovascular bundle. So there's nerves and vessels, arteries and veins. And so as you're shoving, you're sticking your forceps in there to spread the ribs, and you're making an incision down there and putting that pressure in there. So you're probably banging up against those nerves in many cases. And so some nerves, if you just look at them funny, they go, you have neuropathy. Like there's one, the popliteal nerve, which is around the side, the lateral side of your knee. There's a nerve there that, if you just like touch it funny, people get a foot drop, so it's one of those really sensitive nerves. And so you just got to be very careful with some of those things. And so sometimes they take a while to recover. Okay. Anybody else have anything they want to share in the group, or I'll just pop on over to YouTube and see what's going on in YouTube here. We got Get Fit say, hey, Shawn, any tips for leaning out on carnivore female 52-year-olds, 29% body fat, 150 pounds? Sure. Yeah. I like I said, I think at the end of the day, I know as many people cringe when I say this, but I think calories do matter. I think that, yes, there are people that will lose weight by eating more calories on a carnivore diet, which sounds kind of crazy, but there's mathematically, you can figure out why that might be, particularly around protein consumption. Like I said, if you're eating 2,000 calories of donuts and you go eating 2,200 calories of steak, you could potentially lose weight that way, just on the protein calculations alone, because 25% of the protein, say you double your protein content, and then probably 25% of that is free calories because it's metabolized as thermal heat just to metabolize that types of thing. So you can do that. But after you've been on carnivore for, 6 months, a year, and you've gone through all these metabolic shifts and your microbiome's the same, and you're at a steady state, then what do you do? Well, I know people say, well, just eat more fat. And maybe it works out for a couple of people, but generally I don't see that working out for most people. I think at that point, you have to talk about eating less food, eating leaner cuts of meat, and I know that's not fun for anybody because you enjoy just being able to eat unlimited quantities of food. But what I find is, I find it is easier for me to eat less calories and not deal with as much hunger as if I could on another diet, and I can routinely put down 5,000 calories a day, no problem. But I can also sit there and eat, 3,000 calories a day and still be pretty happy. And so I think that's one advantage of that. And then the other thing I do is I like to do what's called fat cycling, so, when I get like seriously, like I want to get really, really lean, I will eat, 3 or 4 days of relatively lean cuts of meat. It may be lean red meat. It may be, I might include some fish and things like that. And then about every 4 days, I'll cycle in some fat again, just to kind of keep my hormones and thyroid and body kind of happy, and just kind of keep playing down with that. And then of course, strength training. If you're not strength training, I know I can't remember the name of the female, you need strength train. I think everybody needs to be doing that. I don't care, once you've gotten over the I'm sick and I can't move type of stuff, and once you start feeling good, it's incredibly important to start strength training. I think the biggest, I've said this many times, the biggest discriminator between those that look good and age healthy and those that don't is training. In many cases, you see that. The people who look frail and weak or, obese, they tend to not to be people that train regularly. People that look fit and robust and vigorous tend to train. And I think that's incredibly important. And, yeah. Okay. Does anyone else have anything they want to share? Amelia is asking again, this is Dr. Baker, am I able to do your carnivore coaching course? I'm in the UK. It has changed my life and I'd like to learn even more and help others. Yes, you can. We have coaches from all over the world. We have them, and we've had a lot of people in the UK. The basic requirements are, you do carnivore diet for 6 months and then you complete our training modules. And, it's about 20, I think it's like 20 videos and there's a significant, 100-question test, and then there's simulated patient encounters and passing that, and then being certified. So yeah, you can do that. Mark Frederick, can you speak to asthma improvements? My asthma only seems to improve when I'm eating strict carnivore. What have you seen most often with asthma? Yeah, this is something that I didn't even know until the last few years ago, because I as an orthopedic surgeon, I really didn't deal with asthma, directly, maybe peripherally. Occasionally you'd have a patient you operated on that had asthma, but generally that was the anesthesiologist dealing with it. Usually give them a nebulizer treatment, around the operation sometimes. But so I never really dealt with asthma in my career. But so I didn't know this until later on. But asthma is actually, in many cases, an autoimmune condition. And so, just like all other autoimmune conditions that we see carnivore helping, that seems to be the case. And so we have seen a number of people with, again, asthma. Again, you can go to carnivore.diet and you can search in the success stories and type in asthma, and you will find a whole bunch of people with asthma success stories. So I think that, there's, a lot of asthma, there's this underlying inflammatory, this kind of this baseline inflammation that's there. And, it's like either it's exercise induced or, allergen, or, you inhale something and set your asthma off. So I think one, however it may impact autoimmune disease, whether it's through gut, modulation of gut physiology, or driving down the overall inflammatory, situation in the body, it seems to help. So, like I said, you said it only works when you go strict carnivore. My suggestion is and I don't know how long you're doing it for. If you're doing it for a few weeks, then I would suggest you do it for a significant period of time, maybe 6 months, strict carnivore. Maybe you can actually, God forbid, cure it. I mean, I don't know if people call me a crazy person for saying cure, but I think we can use the word cure. And then, maybe you have more resilience, and you can, maybe you don't need to be strict carnivore all the time. Maybe you can get away with, 90-80%, like many people do, and so, but like I said, I don't know, whatever the offending nutritional component is in your diet, whether it's affecting your gut or leading to inflammation, obviously the environmental stuff. And like I said, obviously if you have asthma and you live with a cat and you have, and the cat's triggering it, then that's a problem. But surprisingly, I've seen a lot of people, there's another, just an aside, I've seen a lot of people that have had allergies to pets, particularly cats, who say they no longer have cat allergies, which is kind of interesting. Now they can tolerate their cat, whereas before they couldn't. So it's kind of neat. Charlie, is Revero growing well without too many growing pains? Sounds like things are generally positive. Yeah, I mean, we've there's been a couple of people we've hired that didn't work out, and we had to kind of replace those. And there's some people that just came in and decided they didn't want to stay, and we've had a little bit of turnover, but generally it's working pretty well. We haven't started seeing our first patients yet, so I have no doubt that once we start seeing our first patients, there's going to be some problems. I mean, we're going to find out that didn't work. We're going to be shifting, but I mean, that is the reality of, kind of a startup situation. And, we have a good team that's, like I said, you just play, you try to put the best product you can, but nothing reveals the problem until the public gets a hold of it. And then they'll really test it. And the problem, then the hope is we'll be able to swiftly and easily fix those issues, depending on what they are. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see. It should be both. It should be exciting, but also tiring to do that. Jennifer saying that the diet has helped clear up her skin, but she feels even better when she has higher vitamin D levels. Okay, well, yeah, well, that's one of those things that some people would argue for supplementation of vitamin D, and it's one of those things that I look at vitamin D, in a couple different ways, and that one, we've seen for years and years studies where people were showing that they were taking all these supplements for vitamin D, and it wasn't really making any difference, no clinical difference, and a lot of times it wouldn't even really raise their vitamin D levels unless they got these super, super high supplementation levels. So some of that tells me is that, there's probably a metabolic problem that you can't even raise your own vitamin D levels through normal levels of food and supplementation. So you have to fix those things, I think, in a lot of cases. And then I always point back to the Eskimo study from the 1920s or something like that. I think it was the 20s, where they looked at the two populations of Eskimos, Greenland, or Inuit, I guess it should be more politically correct, that were in Greenland, and they found that both populations were very low in vitamin D, as would be expected because of the polar region they're living with very little sunlight, and that one population had problems and one didn't, vitamin D related problems, and the one that had problems was also consuming, sugar and flour and canned goods, and the group that didn't have any vitamin D related problems, namely things like rickets, was just consuming the regular diet without the garbage. So it's more than just what your serum level is. I mean, I think there's something else in addition to that. Okay, got two more minutes left, and then I'm going to go crush a couple steaks. Right.
Hey,
Yeah, go ahead,
on,
Stephen. Yeah.
On vitamin D, I mean, I looked in a lot into that because of COVID, and it was such a big driver. But a lot of that, when you're talking about a group that's eating a lot of sugar and a group that's not eating a lot of sugar, your utilization of any vitamin D is going to be dependent upon your liver and kidneys. So if you're eating a lot of sugar and have a lot of extra glucogen and it's not functioning as properly, you're not going to have as good conversion and utilization of any vitamin D that you absorb or eat.
Yeah, I mean, correct. I mean, I think that's a significant part of it. That's why, like you said, you dump all this vitamin D supplements in these people that are eating a bunch of sugar and crap, and their vitamin D level never goes up until you start, putting in 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 IUs a day, which some people will take. And then, the kidney is part of the conversion process. So the kidney has a role in converting vitamin D, into usable form. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's more than just dumping supplements on people. I mean, I think it's fixing the underlying system. And because, like I said, that's part of that. That's part of the whole thing. That's why a lot of these vitamins never succeed. We see all these studies out there showing that vitamins don't really do much as far as helping. In some cases, they actually are negative. A lot of like vitamin C and vitamin E and things like that. The net effect in many studies shows a net negative effect, actually. So I would, again, I think you should get your food. You should get your nutrition from food and not pills. I mean, regardless. So anyway, okay. Well, guys, that's been great. I assume we have guests tomorrow. I'm not sure, but I hopefully see some of you guys that have a great rest of your weekend. And thanks for being here, guys. And we will, like I said, we'll be back tomorrow and